2NURFM, a broadcast service of the University of Newcastle.
Tuesday, we delve as far as we can into the world of politics, and we do that with a Professor of Politics from the University of Newcastle, Jim Jose. And Jim, back for another Tuesday. It's all changed. The media landscape looking for some changes since we spoke especially spoke to Jane last week. Good morning.
Morning, Mark.
So we saw it on all the front pages of the papers, and it was in all the news bulletins everywhere, looking for some greater protections for those in the journalism community, and also the whistleblowers that are looking to come out and shine the spotlight, particularly on things that are happening in the halls of government.
Well, I guess, Mark, the issue initially, I suppose, hinges on the protection for people who blow the whistle on wrongdoing within government departments or within semi-government departments or whatever. And at present, the protections that are afforded whistleblowers are somewhat weak, and this was sort of brought into some degree of sharpness when a journalist from The Australian had her home searched for incriminating evidence or evidence that could incriminate her in relation to a story that she wrote that was published in The Australian about a particular issue. Now, that generated a reaction from the Murdoch press about protection for journalists, and hence they are prominent in this particular campaign and part of what's become, I think it's called the Australian Right to Know Coalition, basically campaigning for protection for journalists. That in itself is a good thing. That's something that should happen, that journalists who report on various activities and get it into the public spotlight should be protected if they're serving the public interest, which I guess is the sort of core qualification here, that whistleblowers are acting in the public interest, not in their own personal, for personal gain or whatever. It's a bit rich of the Murdoch press to do this because basically they're arguing for special privileges for journalists, but not whistleblowers in general. It's an interesting distinction that one needs to consider here. And they only became involved in this, Mark, when one of their own journalists was implicated or was targeted by the federal police for investigation.
The tricky thing is if you are, and we sort of said this yesterday, if you're a whistleblower, you're someone that's like, you know what, I've got this information and I think it's in the public interest. You see all this other stuff at that greater level come out, and you think, you know what, I don't want to be caught up in that. It's easy just to keep my mouth closed and walk away. From the government's perspective, they're sort of not really completely on board with all of this, are they?
Well, no, that's true. The governments might espouse rhetoric around freedom of information and transparency, but the practices of governments, unfortunately, has been almost the opposite, Mark. So, for example, the Prime Minister came out and said no one is above the law, lawbreakers should be prosecuted, and if a journalist breaks the law, then they should be held accountable type thing. Now, on the surface, one would think, well, yeah, why not? You know, if they break the law, they should be punished. Except they're reporting on activities, and this is the scenario that we need to consider, they're reporting on activities which are themselves potentially illegal, or if not illegal, then unlawful, in the sense that they are breaching appropriate protocols or guidelines or confidences or whatever. So when a whistleblower, be it a journalist or someone else, reveals information about wrongdoing, that's the issue, not the revealing so much, but the wrongdoing itself. And what's happening, and continues to happen, is that governments shift the focus off the wrongdoing, whatever it might be, alleged or otherwise, and they turn the spotlight onto those people who have revealed that something inappropriate or wrong is going on. So the question of no one is above the law is a sort of a disingenuous move by the Prime Minister, a remark that appears to have him appearing above the fray and neutral, but in actual fact still on the side of covering things up, because to uncover something has been rendered illegal in certain contexts, in various contexts. So if we can give just a couple of quick examples, one sort of big famous case that's currently happening at the moment with Witness K, I should say, revealed through proper channels initially the wrongdoing of an Australian secret organisation acting at the behest of the government. That person now faces criminal charges, as does the lawyer that he was instructed by his superiors to take on. And the journalists at the ABC who revealed this were also targeted by the Australian Federal Police. Actually, I correct myself here. They didn't reveal it as such. They were reporting on a story that was revealed in the Australian a couple of days earlier. No journalist and no person from the Australian was ever targeted by the Australian Federal Police at that time. That was back in about 2012, 13 or something. Of course, now that one of their own was actually targeted, we're hearing a different story. But to come back to that example, there was absolute silence when the ABC was raided on the same issue that the Australian itself had actually done the revealing. So they were totally silent around all of that. Then there are the non-journalist cases of, for example, the gentleman in the tax office who revealed inappropriate behaviour by the tax officials, breaching their guidelines, behaving illegally, etc. He faces 161 years in prison if he's found guilty. He's revealed wrongdoing, but the crime of wrongdoing has gone by the by. The crime of revealing it has been the
somehow
issue.
The greater crime, yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the issues that seems to keep getting buried here. Talking about freedom of the press misses the point that whether it's the journalist or a whistleblower, that's protecting them from being criminalised. That is really the issue. And governments will criminalise the messenger rather than face up to the fact that they themselves have done the wrong thing. So if you're wanting, for example, if the government claims it's serious about having a properly functioning democratic process, being held accountable and all the rest of the democratic principles that we uphold, then they actually have to look to themselves. And this is a bipartisan issue, Mark, if I can put it like that. It's bipartisan in the sense that over the past, let's just say the past 20 years, both sides of the parliamentary divide in and out of government, when they're in government, they're busily covering up and not wanting any secrets, any wrongdoing revealed. When they're in opposition, they're only too happy to reveal this. And the other thing, very quickly here, Mark, is that the biggest leakers from government are members of the government itself. They never seem to be held accountable or taken to task because these are strategic leaks to maximise the political advantage of the party in government, whoever it might be.
In other words, politics as usual, and whoever has the biggest spotlight to shine on somebody else wins. Jim Jose, thank you for your thoughts on this, mate. We'll talk to you next week.
Okay, my pleasure, Mark.
Right here at 2NURFM, our Professor of Politics, Jim Jose, 103.7.